I did consider putting a fireplace in the background just to kind of set the tone, but we'll go with video games. It's always a challenge to start off some of these videos. You know what I'm going to talk about. You've seen the title. I know what I'm going to talk about, but I haven't talked about it yet. So how do we meet in the middle somewhere and get this thing started? Hi and welcome. I first want to thank Lame Dad Retro Gamer for tagging me in his memorable games video, asking me to reply to him and to everybody with some memorable games of my own from my childhood. I do have 10 that I've collected together to go through. This video is a little later than I wanted. I already recorded a list of 10 originally and then scrapped it to come back again. Felt like it was a little too scripted. Not really enough me in there. So let's try this again. A little bit more relaxed, a little bit more open and transparent about some of these games that I definitely reminisce a lot about from my childhood. Now I'm going to go through my list chronologically, so we'll start way back with the Nintendo and we'll slowly catch up to near the present. So the first game on the list is way back into the Nintendo, like I mentioned, and it is a fan favorite for a lot of people who enjoy the series. I'll share why it's a memorable one for me, and that's Mega Man on the Nintendo. Back when I was growing up, my brother and I shared a bedroom, and so we also shared a lot of our consoles. We had the Nintendo, and then we got into a Mega Drive, and then a Super Nintendo, and so on. But we always kind of shared those games. We didn't have a lot of games that we could play, so when we did get some, we definitely went through them together. And there was some rivalry in there, some good rivalry, between brothers. But it was a lot of fun, just kind of sharing some of those experiences, trying to help each other out when we get stuck, trying to maybe not help each other out, just to be able to beat each other. But yeah, it was a lot of good fun. And so originally we got our Nintendo with the Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers combo, so we spent a lot of time playing through Mario Brothers, getting used to how that game plays, kind of how the jumping works in those levels. When Mega Man came along and we managed to get a copy, we tried to play through that one. And I think we'd spent so much time getting used to the kind of physics of Super Mario Brothers that we just struggled immensely with Mega Man. I think we made the mistake of starting with Rockman as the first level, and we just couldn't even get off the first puzzle. Just the first piece of getting to the edge of the cliff there and trying to make the jump onto those platforms. Forget the fact that those platforms will eventually drop you if you don't jump with them. We couldn't even figure out the gravity and the physics of the game to actually get onto those platforms. It must have taken us like weeks just to even get onto the first section of that thing. So we always kind of struggled to get through that one, and we'd work together to figure out how to get through the puzzles. We'd go and play, Cutman stage and Leckman and Iceman, and we'd figure those ones out, but we'd always get to Rockman again, no matter which order we played in, and we just couldn't get through it. So we never got any further than that for a long time in the game. We really struggled to get a hold of the Dr. Wily stages. As brothers, we kind of persisted together to try and figure it out, and eventually got the hang of how gravity works in this game. And we were able to actually get to the Dr. Wily stages and eventually to the end of the game. And so for me, that was a really memorable experience just between my brother and I, trying to figure out this new game and figure out how we could progress. Especially as there wasn't really a multiplayer option in Mega Man, so we were really just playing against each other. But it was really good kind of camaraderie for just figuring that out. It was a good time. It was a really good time on that game. Game number 2 is actually a few years later onto the Mega Drive/Genesis era, and that's Truxton. Truxton's a great top-down shooter that I enjoyed playing when I was growing up, less so because of the game itself, and more just because of the situation around it. So at the time, I didn't actually own a Mega Drive or a Genesis. I didn't have any friends who had one either, but there used to be a monthly event in the town that we grew up in that people would basically bring their consoles and PCs. This is kind of the early 90s, so PCs, like normal home PCs, is really kind of starting to kick in. Wolfenstein 3D and Doom and that kind of stuff is coming out. And so people used to bring their PCs and their consoles to like a town hall at a monthly event. And so people could it was just an open thing where anybody could turn up without a machine. You had to pay, I think, if you wanted to bring a machine and set it up, but otherwise it was free to explore. And it was just a really good community event. People would just kind of bring their machines together, and anybody could, depending on how open people were with what they brought, you could jump in and play, a game on the Mega Drive you didn't own. You could play Wolfenstein 3D, because at the time PCs were very expensive, and so a lot of us didn't have PCs. But that was definitely my first experience of seeing Truxton, and I just remember it being a really awesome arcade conversion to see at the time. And I did enjoy the game. I definitely have it on my list to go back and get, because I didn't get too far into it, but it was a fun 2-player with the other person who brought their console at the time. So yeah, I just have really good memories of that game and that event in particular. And I went for a couple of years growing up as a kid. I really do have good memories of Truxton, and I haven't played it in a long time, but it's on my list. It's going to be definitely a game I pick up early next year. So really looking forward to that. We're going to wind forward a little bit more into the Super Nintendo era and on to the next game, which is Star Wing. Not Star Fox, because I grew up in the UK, but same game with a different name, but Star Wing that came out in the 90s. So this game is memorable for many people for lots of different reasons. I mean, it was the first kind of Super FX chip game that we got exposed to. There's a lot to love about the story within the universe you were playing in, as well as the game itself. For me, it's very memorable because at the time before the game came out, I think it was the same in the US, there was a competition on in some of the stores that were selling the game about a month before it came out, at least in Europe. The game came out in June 93, and they ran a competition, a Star Wing competition in May 93. And they did a Star Fox one as well, but I'm not sure on the timing on that one. But I remember seeing this game in a local store before it was released, and of course you couldn't play it ahead of the game being released for the competition. So you had a 4-minute window. It was actually a promotional copy of the game that had a special set of levels that's different from the regular game. And you had a 4-minute timer to get through some of these kind of shortened levels and get a high score, as high as you could, as part of the competition. And I believe winners, I don't know about the UK, I was reading up about the US version of the competition, but like winners from each store got like a special Star Fox jacket, which is kind of awesome. I don't know if the UK people got the same thing, but there was definitely prizes involved for winning at a store level as well as winning at a larger level, like the country level. But I took part in this competition, and I remember coming third in this local store. I don't have the certificate, unfortunately. You did get a certificate at the end of it with your score, your point score on it to take away. And I do remember having that pinned up on my wardrobe in my bedroom. So I definitely remember taking part in the competition and getting third place with the point score. I want to say it was maybe in the like low 100,000 something score, but I mean, I don't have the certificate. So it's just me trying to remember what the points value was. But it was, that memory just sticks in my mind from it being a very unique experience around that game before it launched, with the competition that was out there and the kind of special version of the game that definitely piqued my interest in what the Super Nintendo could do and what the Super FX chip was going to do for games. And it was just a really, really cool experience to come away with a certificate as well. And of course, I did pick up the game pretty quickly after release, after having already played it. But yeah, like that game has stuck around for a long time in my memorable games list. So I mean, I do have Star Fox at least, which isn't the Star Wing copy. I could, with the Super NT, I could pick up a Star Wing copy. So I might do that just for having the UK European named version as well that I can play. But yeah, Star Fox is definitely a really, really fun game for me to go back to. And on to the next game, number 4, another Super Nintendo game. In compiling this list, I went back and thought about games that I've played that are in my top 10 list, as well as other ones that would be outside that list that are more memorable. And I realized that for the longest time, I've talked about Final Fantasy VII being my first introduction to JRPGs and kind of hooked me in on that genre of game. And then I realized going through this list, that's not true at all, because I picked up Secret of Mana, which I have Collection of Mana at least on the Switch, so it's included in this game. I will definitely pick up the cart at some point on the Super Nintendo. But I originally played Secret of Mana, and that's really my first JRPG that I got introduced to. So it wasn't Final Fantasy VII, as much as that's a great game that I have great memories of. It was totally Secret of Mana. So knowing that is actually a 3-player game, if you had like the multi-tap for the Super Nintendo and enough controllers, or enough friends with consoles with controllers. I never actually played it with anybody else, but that's something I would love to do at some point in the future. But I remember playing through this game on my own and just being wowed by the world that it's set in and the whole RPG experience. I mean, the fact that you level up and you gain experience points as you play, and your skill sets get better, and the weapons that you have and armor that you can pick up just improves the game as it plays, and then difficulty continues to ramp up as you go through the story. And the story was just cool to get sucked into as a kid growing up, and I really, really enjoyed playing through that world and trying to uncover the mysteries of what was going on. And I always kind of chastised myself for never finishing the game. I think I didn't realize at the time that, grinding for leveling up was going to be a thing you needed to do. So when I got to the end of the game, which I'll try not to spoil, I didn't realize that I was underleveled for that experience, and so those end fights just became really, really challenging, and I couldn't finish the game. And in hindsight, if I realized I could have gone back and just continued to level up my character to make those end fights easier, I would have finished the game, definitely. But not realizing that at the time, I put the game down incomplete, and for that, I definitely want to go back and finish it at some point. But again, holds a lot of memories for that story getting pulled into, and it being the first JRPG that I actually did play. So Secret of Mana for me really holds a candle next to Final Fantasy VII. And I'd love to play through that thing 3-player at some point, knowing that you can. I haven't checked to see whether the Switched version does anything with 3-player in the version on there. Online 3-player would be awesome because that would make things much easier, but I'll take any kind of 3-player option for that game. It would be fun to go through it with some in-person help. And on to game number 5. Now, while I've been working on my own list, I've definitely been watching the community's response to a lot of these memorable games videos. And one thing I've noticed is there isn't too many PC games in people's lists. There's maybe a few, but most people have stuck with consoles, which is interesting. I'm surprised that there isn't too many other PC entries in there. So there's going to be a couple in my list. I definitely hit a point in the late 90s and early 2000s with PC gaming. And so there's a couple of memorable ones in there for me. And so number 5 is going to be one of them, and it is Solar Winds on the PC. Now, I'm definitely interested to see if anyone's heard of Solar Winds, because it was a shareware game that came out in the 90s, where the first kind of introduction to the story for the game was given away for free, and then the idea was that you would get sucked into that story and you would buy the rest of the game, which contained the rest of the story, and I don't think they released at the same time, so you even had to wait for that second half of the game to actually come out before you could figure out what the rest of the story was. It's a space-based top-down exploration game where you start off in a solar system and you actually don't have any knowledge of your past, so you're kind of uncovering what you're doing in that solar system, as well as the other races and political systems that exist in there, while trying to also uncover like a group of people that are being sought after or hunted by the government, and you're trying to maybe align yourselves with those people and uncover, like, there seems to be some kind of government conspiracy or suppression of knowledge, and you're trying to uncover exactly what's going on and why. So I mean, I remember getting sucked into this story as well, because it's intriguing just to not know what the origin of your own character is in that story. And it's a fun little, almost RPG style game. You can upgrade your ship over time and you get more power that you can put into different systems like weapons and shields and engines, so you can go faster, and that allows you to kind of further explore the solar system that you're in and potentially beyond. And so the game is probably only 5 or 6 hours of actual gameplay before you hit the end of the game, and then you're prompted to purchase the sequel, which is really just the rest of the story, to uncover what else is happening. And again, I have a memory of just enjoying that experience at the time. There hadn't been any other real kind of top-down space-based games on PC around that era, so I remember getting pulled into that story and enjoyed how it played. And I also annoyed the fact that we never bought the rest of the game, because obviously shareware was easy to give away in magazines and stuff like that, so getting hold of the game was easy. But then you're going to have to actually, fork out money to uncover the rest of the story. And so we never did go back, or nobody ever did purchase the rest of the game to uncover what else happens. So it's totally abandoned, where right now you can just go download both parts of the game and enjoy it. So it's in my backlog to do so, and I'm not going to wait too much longer to actually go download it and start playing it. But in looking for some footage for the game for this video, it just brought me right back into that game and that world. It's a fun little role-playing space-based story. So moving back to consoles for this next game, I did have an N64 in the late 90s. I'd kind of skipped between the Super Nintendo and the N64. I'd definitely gone the path of the Sega Saturn for a little bit, and then kind of got disappointed with some of the games that were coming out, switched to a PS1, enjoyed that for a while, then went to an N64. A lot of game trade-ins, unfortunately. I probably just got impatient waiting for new games to come out, and so I would play a couple of them and then be done, and then see the new shiny thing that had been released, Sony's new machine. And I would go check that out, and we would trade up and just keep trading up into the next machine. So we didn't really keep a lot of consoles, unfortunately. But N64 we did get to in the 90s, and I actually took that one with me when I went to university after graduating in 97. And so I took the N64 with me to college, to university, so that I had something to play while I was there, because, it's downtime that you got to fill, right? But I also kind of wanted to leverage it as a little bit of a bridge to meet other people. So I found other people that were in the dorm that had gaming interests. I would hopefully be able to pull them in, or at least have an easy way in with people by leveraging video games. So I took my N64 with me and a whole series of games. Blast Corps was a great one. I can't remember if Ocarina of Time had come out at that point, but I probably picked it up at some point in there. Mario 64 was a great one, obviously. But number 6 on this list is actually going to be 1080. I don't really play that many sports games. I kind of have a couple of NHL games that came out in the 2010s on the PS4, but sports games aren't really my thing. I'm not good at them. I don't have a lot of people that play them, and so I tend to stay away from sports games. But for some reason, I had a copy of 1080. I think I must have been getting into snowboarding at the time, on TV, not in person, because I'm definitely not a sporty person. But I had a copy of 1080, and I really enjoyed doing some of the tricks on that thing. The half pipe was really fun to play through. And it's a great kind of skill game. So I have a lot of good memories of playing that one. And particularly, I took it with me to university. And so I had a lot of time spent practicing tricks and practicing trying to get better and better scores down that half pipe. And then being able to play it with other people and compete for high scores with other people that were also in university at the same time. So for me, as much as it wasn't the best game on the N64 at the time when we were playing it, it's a great memory for getting to know new people and having some good rivalry with just high scores and working to get better at the skills in that game. So I don't currently collect for the N64, but if at any point it came out on like the Switch Online, I would definitely get back into that one. It would be a lot of fun. Moving forwards a few years into university, my next game is actually going to be a PS2 game, which I didn't own at the time, but did play. So there's a story behind this one. The game is Metal Gear Solid 2. I have it on the Vita, but I have the digital copy, so I can't show you the box for that one. And I have it on the PS4 as well, digitally. But I do need to get a physical copy of that thing at some point. But Metal Gear Solid 2 is the first PS2 game that I played where I didn't own a PS2. I basically rented a PS2 from a video rental store, back when they existed, where you could put down a deposit and rent a console and a game for 48 hours and be able to play it. So Metal Gear Solid 2 was out. I love the Metal Gear Solid series. If 2 wasn't on my memorable list, then 1 totally would be. But the second one is more memorable just because of the situation around playing it, in that I went to the video rental store, put my deposit down, took the console home and the copy of Metal Gear Solid 2 so I could play it on a particular weekend. But they unfortunately didn't give me a memory card, and the place was 45 minutes drive away. So once I booted the game up, started playing it for a little bit, went to save it so I could pick it back up a little later, realized they didn't give me a memory card, and then was just kind of left with the reality of, I'm going to have to sit here and play this game through in one sitting. Now at the time, I naively believed the entire game was just a tanker from the demo, right? Or maybe just a small piece after that, and then just continually got further and further into Big Shell, wondering what the hell was going on, where is this game going, why is this game a lot longer than it seemed it was going to be. So I did play through that game till about 2 in the morning, needed to just go to sleep because I could not get past a boss fight. and kind of left the console paused, went to sleep, hoping the thing did not turn off or the power didn't go out. Thankfully, when I got back up like 5 hours later, it was still running and it was still paused where I left it. So continued on to the boss fight, beat that boss, continued through the rest of the story, and finished the game that weekend. So I've played through that whole thing in like 15 hours roughly. And of course missed like plenty of things that you could explore and find in the game, as I was just trying to rush through and make sure I didn't run out of time before 48 hours was up and I had to take the console back. So they gave me a funny look when I took the console back after asking where the memory card was and me explaining that you didn't give me one, so I can't give you a memory card back, but I still finished this game. So yeah, tons. Obviously that's a memory I'm going to keep for a long time, and I keep going back to the Metal Gear Solid series. The HD collection is awesome. Subsistence, the kind of the V with the VR missions for Metal Gear Solid 2, really cool addition to the game. So I own it on multiple systems. I've got it on the PS4, I've got it on the Vita. At some point I'll maybe pick up a PS2 and try and get an original copy, but I'm just glad that I have copies I can play again. So that's a really good fun game to go back to. So around the same time, PC gaming was continuing to be a strong presence in the market, and the internet was definitely becoming more popular. So connected gaming was present, and MMOs were certainly establishing themselves as a good place to meet other people and play some games you couldn't do otherwise on console at the time. So I never really got into World of Warcraft, but I definitely found a sci-fi punk style game that I'm interested again to see if anyone's heard of, and that's Neocron, that was out in 2002. They had a sequel to the game that was effectively just a reboot to clean up a few things in 2004. And so this is a FPS MMO where you're set in a future apocalyptic scenario within a city where there's futuristic technology, and you've got full RPG stuff. So you've got skill points that you can add into different things. You've got classes, you've got machine guns and melee weapons and knives, and there's like rocket launchers. You can craft material, you can craft weapons and stuff in there. You can definitely tailor how you want to play the game. So you can kind of be strength based, you can be intelligence based. There's actually psi weapons as well, so you can use your mind as a weapon with a glove. So there's tons of things to do in this game. It was very ahead of its time, in my opinion, when it came out. It was unfortunately fraught with plenty of bugs. It kind of died out when the people maintaining the game just had issues where the database would keep crashing and people would lose progress. They'd have to roll back the database, sometimes up to a week, and that just eventually turned off enough people because they kept losing progress, so you were just going to give up on the game. But the setting was just awesome, from being this futuristic kind of cyberpunk scenario. Everybody started off with the same setup where you had to basically go down into the sewers in the city and just beat rats to death with your hand or with a knife until you could get enough level up and enough currency to do anything else and actually get a first gun. But I mean, anyone who played that game would tell you the same story of just having to beat rats to death with your fists and ideally not die. So it just holds a lot of memories from being the first MMO that I played. I ended up going into a intelligence-based character, so I kind of focused on blueprints and making weapons. That was the only way to actually make weapons that had slots that could have mods added to them, so the game naturally made a point of having to cooperate with other people that you didn't know. So you'd have people standing in the common plaza areas, just kind of spamming chat occasionally, trying to sell the fact that they had a certain intelligence score. So somebody could just give you a blueprint and all the ingredients to make a weapon and give you some money, and then you would just put it into the processor window, click a button, give it back to them, and they would make money. And so it was just a lot of fun. It was many a good year spent playing that game, and again, until the same thing that everybody else felt, the game just was too unstable, and all the rollbacks just made it annoying and frustrating to play because you weren't guaranteed that all the progress you'd made would stick around. So people just kind of slowly checked out and moved on. And I think I probably did around like 2005, 2006. There were other MMOs to check out at the time. So number 9 on my list is from the only time I owned a Microsoft console. I've pretty much stuck with the Sony platforms since day one. I mean, PS1, 2, 3, 4, the PSP, the Vita, I've had them all. And so at one point I did own a Microsoft 360. And that was mainly because my brother also had one, so we could play games together. He originally had an Xbox, an OG Xbox, when it first came out, but he had moved out from our home at that point, so we didn't share that particular console. But we then did manage to get 360s together so we could play some games online. I also love this series of games. I'm watching a couple of people play through this series right now on Twitch, and it's amazing to see it again. And that is Mass Effect 2. So the Mass Effect series is just great. I'm sure everyone's played it, or most people who enjoy RPGs, Western RPGs, have played it. But I mean, that game just has the best characters, the best plot that I've played in that kind of setting for, you know, futuristic sci-fi. I think a lot of people would say that 2 is probably the sweet point in the trilogy for having amazing characters, very interesting plot with challenges. Obviously, there's high risk involved. I don't want to spoil it too much in case you really haven't played that game, but there is definitely high risk in your choices and how well you prepare for what happens in that story. So, you know, consequences are real, and it's just a series I've fallen in love with since the first one. The second one is my favorite, really closely followed by the third one, as much as the third one has a controversial ending. And so yeah, I have memories for Mass Effect 2, both for the game itself, but also the fact that it was on a 360, which I didn't own for that long. I maybe had it for 18 months before my wife and I actually moved from the UK to the US, and so we kind of sold most of those things. We sold most of the electronics, knowing they weren't going to be too compatible between countries, and so I didn't keep the 360, and I never repurchased it when I got over here. I ended up going with the PS3 and continuing my Sony list of consoles. So yeah, Mass Effect 2 on the 360 has good memories for multiple reasons. And the last game on my list is back to PC, and that's going to be Battlefield 3 that came out in the 2010s, early 2010s. So I know this was a multi-platform game that came out on PC and console. I do own it on the PS4 and on PC, but originally when I purchased it on PC, a lot of friends at the time were PC gamers as well, with moving to the US and kind of getting to know new people. So kind of PC gaming was where most of them landed, and so that was the easiest way for us to play the same games together. Battlefield 3 is memorable for multiple reasons, primarily because of the friends that I had at the time, that we kind of got into that multiplayer squad action within Battlefield 3. I know the technology for that engine at the time was, you know, revolutionary and was pretty amazing for what they could do with the graphics now when that game was released. And the story, the main single player story, is it's kind of okay. It's really half a tech demo, but you know, it's like what, 6 hours, I think 6-7 hours, so it's not really the main point of that game. But yeah, there was quite a few of us, more than 4 of us, so we'd have to rotate around who was going to play those games to get into a squad together and go through multiplayer. And I just had really good memories with the people that I was working with at the time, that were new friends from moving into the US, and you know, we have plenty of tales of just crazy stunts and things that we did in that game, and kind of clutch plays with Capture the Flag and some of the other modes from just playing through that game. The Battlefield series in general has been a fun one for me on PC. I'm not very good at it, but I kind of enjoy it. So it's just it's a lot of times a fun setting, and just interesting to see what they do with some of the vehicles and the map layouts and stuff like that. That one lasted a good, 6 months of weekly play, probably, with friends. So it was just a ton of fun. Just a really, really good time with friends. And I'd love to try and find another game like that to bring some friends back into. So there you have my top 10 memorable games. I had tons of games outside of this list, so it was a little tricky to get 10 together, but it was a good spread across console and PC. And I want to thank Lame Dad again for nominating me to respond to this video. And so to pass the torch on and tag 3 other channels, I would like to tag Tiger Chainsaw. I know you already do top 10 lists that you like and don't like, so let's see a top 10 memorable games, please. A friend remembers I know they put out some really good content on some retro games and consoles, so it'd be interesting to see what their memorable list is. And finally, Nathan from Switch Stream Gaming. I've definitely been enjoying their channel recently, and so a top 10 memorable list would be cool to see. Thank you for sticking around to the end. If you've enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. If you've played some of these rarer PC games like SolarWinds or Neocron, I would love to hear about your experience in the comments. And if you'd like to check some of the back catalogue or see what's coming out in the future, please subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you in the next one.